record. Okay, so we're going to begin with the salutation to the Buddha. So we did the bows, now we do the salutation.
Namo
Namo.
tassa.
And let me mute people. Yep, or please mute yourself. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the worthy one, homage to the blessed one, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. And today is October 7th, 2023. And now we are coming to the end of the Book of Fives. And so usually when we come to a sutta in any of the chapters in the Anguttara Nikaya, I sort of look through the sutta in advance. I find maybe parallel texts or texts that will shed a different light on the sutta, and I put them together. I make some notes, and then I use that as the basis for the class. But today we're going to be doing, as we come to the last sections of the Book of Fives, this will be something like, we have the expression of potluck. Potluck is where people bring different dishes to having like a party, and everybody prepares their own dish. Is that what it is? This is a little bit like potluck, or maybe a better expression, is it something grab bag? Where you have a bag with different like presents in it, and everybody reaches in, and the presents are wrapped up in different kinds of wrapping paper, so you don't know what you're getting, but you just put your hand in and you pick out something in the bag, and then you open it up, and maybe with the kids, it's a little model car, it's a little doll, it's a rubber softball. So they get the different presents within the big bag. So we're just going to go through. I just did a very quick look this morning just to see what's here. But we're not going to do elaborate explanations of each one, but just see some of the suttas maybe will be a little bit strange. Okay, so now, so you see this is the fifth 50, so it's really the last major section in the Book of Fives. And so now sutta number 201, this is quite a very important sutta actually. So here a monk by the name of Kimbila comes to the Buddha and asks, what is the cause and reason why the good dhamma doesn't continue long after the Tathagata or a Buddha attains final nibbana? And from the actual wording of the Pali, it's a little bit ambiguous whether the question concerns the teaching of any Buddha, including like the Buddhas of the distant past and maybe Buddhas of the future. According to the hypothesis, there are Buddhas through the 3 periods of time, or whether it's referring specifically to the teaching of our Buddha, the Buddha Gautama, or Shakyamuni. And I translated it as if it were a generalization, but another monk who I consulted when doing this translation, Venerable Brahmali in Australia, he disagreed, and he thought that, he said, it seems more likely to me that this sutta is concerned specifically what will happen after Gautama Buddha passes away. So from the actual wording of the Pali, we just can't determine exactly what is the intention, whether it's a generalization or something referring specifically to the Buddha Gautama. But it seems to me it's a generalization. Okay, so now the Buddha is answering, and he says that after the Buddha has attained final Nibbana, the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male lay followers and female followers dwell without reverence and deference towards the teacher. The word translated teacher here is, I have to use a capital T to show it's referring to the Buddha himself. It's the sutta. It's not a teacher, but it is the sutta. So the sutta is the one who establishes the teaching in the world, not just somebody who continues to teach. Okay, so they dwell without reverence and deference towards the teacher, the Buddha, without reverence and deference towards the dhamma, without reverence and deference towards the sangha, without reverence and deference towards the training. So these are four essential objects of reverence: the triple gem, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And then you could divide the Dhamma into two aspects: the aspect of, maybe you could say, doctrine and practice. So when you make that division, then the doctrine, Dhamma is the doctrine, and the practice is the training. And then the fifth one is very important and interesting. We often tend to overlook this. They dwell without reverence and deference toward each other. In other words, the Buddha is extremely, deeply concerned, in order to ensure that his teaching will last long, that there will be harmony within the community that he's established. And that community has four divisions. So we could say that this is the division within the sangha. Oh, I see. Okay, it's up here. It's the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, the male lay followers and female followers. So to ensure that the teaching lasts long, these four communities have to have reverence and deference towards each other. And maybe we could see this as operating both internally, let's say in terms of internal relations and external relations. Internal relations mean within the community of monks, they have to have reverence and deference towards each other. Within the community of bhikkhunis or nuns, reverence and deference towards each other. And so too with male lay followers and female lay followers. So that is like having harmony within the country, so that the country doesn't get split apart into a kind of maybe a non-violent civil war, internal conflicts, divisions, hostility, or like international, like wars between countries. That would be like conflicts between these different communities. Okay, so we have to have this internal harmony within each community and sort of an external harmony between the four communities, the four subdivisions of the greater Buddhist community. So when that harmony breaks up because of lack of reverence and deference, then the teaching will gradually wither away and vanish. Are you still hearing me? I just got some strange message that I'm signed out.
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, that must refer to my other computer. Okay, so the opposite of this, why does the good Dhamma continue long after the Buddha has attained parinibbana? And of course, the answer follows just logically from the above. So it's when the monks, nuns, male and female lay followers have reverence and deference towards the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and the training, and they dwell with reverence and deference towards each other. But within, I have to say, within this reverence and deference, we're in a democratic social order now, but in the Buddhist community, traditionally, there's reverence and deference of the lay people towards the monastics, because the monastics give up the household life and live a life of renunciation and devote themselves fully, or at least in theory, fully to the study, practice, and teaching of the Dhamma. But still there should be, let's say, respect amongst members of all four communities towards each other. We'll take a few suttas, then we could take some questions, but if you have your questions on your own, if you have some paper next to you, you could write them or you could type them, and then we'll get to them later. Okay, this is just a short one. I use this as the basis for a talk during the Labor Day retreat. So 5 benefits in listening to the Dhamma. And we have to remember, in the Buddha's time, there were no printed books, no Dhamma books, not to speak of printed books. There were not even palm leaf manuscripts, written manuscripts that recorded the Buddha's teaching. But to learn the Dhamma, you have to go to listen to talks on the Dhamma or to get personal teaching from a teacher. So 5 benefits in listening to the Dhamma. You get to hear what you haven't heard before. You can clear up. You get like elaborations on teachings that you might have heard. Brief teachings might be expounded in more detail. Unclear teachings might have been explained more clearly. You get over your doubts and perplexity. You have a chance by listening to the Dhamma, you can straighten out your views, that you clarify, and maybe you get your understanding becomes sharper and clearer, more precise. And sometimes they say just by listening to the Dhamma, the mind becomes tranquil, calm, collected. Okay, so 5 benefits in listening to the Dhamma. Some teachings that we've gone through already. I'll skip over those. This is a very important one. This is on, the word is translated here as barrenness. The Pali word is kila. Kila. I think I have it in the note. Well, Chaito Kila. And so it's here rendered mental barrenness. Venerable Nyanamoli, in his translation of the Majjhima Nikaya, had translated it as wilderness of the heart, but in a way that's not quite satisfactory, because wilderness suggests like a forest in which there are many trees growing, there are many bushes, plants, moss, ferns, a lot of wildlife. But the Pali word kila has almost the opposite meaning. The actual sense is that of barren land. Like you have like a piece of, maybe it used to be fertile farmland, but now because of, you see sometimes pictures of the impact of climate change, when there's long drought, no rain, then the land that had once been fertile farmland becomes hard soil, cracked cracks appear and nothing will grow. So that's kila, it's barren land, hard, arid soil. And then in relation to the mind, it's barrenness of mind, rigidity of mind. Okay, so what are these 5 kinds of mental barrenness? And it's explained with regard to the monk, but it could apply to anybody. So one is perplexed about the teacher, again, the Buddha. This is doubt about the Buddha. And then the consequence, when you have doubt, perplexity, uncertainty about the Buddha, then you don't place confidence in him. And so the mind doesn't incline to effort, to striving, to diligent practice. And so the mind becomes barren, like a plot of land on which the crops won't grow. Then you have this perplexity and doubt about the Dhamma. Of course, a kind of inquisitive doubt is what the Buddha encourages, but this is more like a kind of stubborn, skeptical doubt, a kind of paralyzing state of uncertainty. And so one is not able to place trust in the Dhamma, and then you don't make the effort to practice diligently. You have doubt about the sangha, and in this case, it's the Aryan sangha. Like many people, so I have to say, sadly, when they observe the behavior sometimes of contemporary monks, it's more monks than nuns. Usually the nuns inspire more confidence than some of the monks. It leads to perplexity and doubt. But this is not referring to the conventional monastic order, but it's the Aryan Sangha, the spiritual community of noble ones. And again, there's no effort, striving, diligent practice. Similarly, if you have doubt about the training, then you're not going to devote yourself to the training. But then the 5th one is interesting here, because this ties up with the 5 things that shorten the lifespan of the Buddha's teaching. Yeah, I'm getting some. You have to ask people to keep muted. So remember, the 5th thing that leads to the decline of the Dhamma is that the community, members of the community, dwell without reverence and deference towards each other. And so we have a sort of counterpart to that here. And here the Buddha is just narrowly focusing on the monks. Maybe it's because conflicts tend to erupt between the monks more often than between the other communities. But I think it happens in all the communities that here we have a monk is irritated by his fellow monks, displeased with them, and resentful towards them, ill-disposed towards them. And when that happens, then he doesn't incline to effort and striving. And so that becomes a kind of mental barrenness. Yeah, so you could see that very close similarity between the 5 kinds of mental barrenness and the 5 things that lead to the decline of the Dhamma after the Buddha passes away. And then corresponding to the 5 kinds of mental barrenness, there's another group called the 5 kinds of bondages of the mind. Yeah, so these are called Chaitaso Vini Bandha. And then the commentary says that these are things that grasp the mind, that shackle it as though you're grabbing it with a fist. And so therefore they're called bondages of the mind. So the first 3, and again is explained with relation in regard to a monk. And the first 3 seem a bit similar. So the monk is sort of overcome by lust for sensual pleasures, desire, passion, craving for them. And when that happens, then the mind doesn't incline to effort and striving. Then there's lust for the body. I guess that means attachment to one's own body. Then lust for form. I don't really know so much what is really the distinction between form, because form could have two meanings, rupa. One meaning is visible forms. And so in a way, you would think that that is comprised under lust for sensual pleasures. And then the other meaning of form is material form, that is one's own body. You would think that would be included under lust for the body. Maybe in setting out this group, the Buddha wanted to have 5 bondages of the mind corresponding to the 5 kinds of mental barrenness. So to create a group of 5, he just brings in form here. Okay, then the 4th one is that the monk eats as much as he wants until his belly is full. And then once he gets a full belly, then when it comes time for meditation, he starts thinking, I ate too much, I really have to lie down. Maybe take a little rest before I can start practicing meditation. And then he'll set his alarm clock for 2 hours, so he'll take a little nap of 2 hours. And so then he indulges in what's called the pleasure of rest. Of course, rest is neutral, rest you need, but this is the pleasure of sloth, the pleasure of sleep. And so then after taking a nap for 2 hours, he wakes up and the mind is sort of reeling from excessive sleep. And then he just doesn't have that determination to undertake the work of practice. So that's the 4th bondage of the mind. Then the 5th one is that the monk lives the spiritual life, the life of renunciation, and even the life of meditation, but not aiming for liberation, but hoping for rebirth in a certain group of devas, with the thought, by following this code of virtuous behavior, undertaking these observances, even practicing austerity, renunciation, I will be reborn as a deva or as a follower of the devas amongst the group of devas. So actually, it seems in this case, he actually is undertaking effort, perseverance, and striving, but the striving is not directed towards gaining insight, wisdom, and liberation, but maybe doing meritorious practices in order to get reborn in the Deva world. So those are the 5 bondages of the mind. Okay, any questions at this point about any of these things we've covered? Okay, I don't see any hand. Okay, I see one. So this will be charu dhamma.
Yes, Bhante. What is the meaning of deference, the Pali for deference in the first discourse? And the implications of the lack of deference, which I think we see these days.
Yeah, I shouldn't know it offhand. Let me I'm opening up okay, good. Okay, so what was the number of that sutta? 2,201? Yeah, the Pali word I'll copy and put it in. Okay, do you see it now? It's sapatisa, and it seems to me that it's composed from a prefix sa, means with, and patisa. I wonder if it's glosed any place. Let's just see. Hmm. Okay, I think I see the sense now. So it's a certain, maybe we would call it respect for seniority based on the commentary. So this is a commentary, I think this was the Vinaya commentary, that glosses Garava as Garubhava. So Garubhava is treating as weighty, in the sense of showing respect. So Garava, you can see it's with, and then the word Garava is actually related to the word Guru. And Guru is the Pali counterpart of the Sanskrit guru. And the original meaning of guru is when you take somebody as a guru, as a teacher, but now they have political gurus and cultural gurus. But the original meaning of guru in the spiritual context is heavy. So the person who is treated as heavy in the sense that you assign importance to that person has a major role in one's life, that is one's guru. So it's the person towards whom one shows reverence. So that's the guru, Garubhava. And that's Garava is derived from the word guru. And then sapatisa is related to the word Jataka Bhava. Jataka means elder. So it's the one who is treated as being an elder. Like a Jataka Bhatta is the elder brother. So it's a relationship of respect that juniors will show towards elders, or maybe that those of, say, less spiritual development will extend to those who are at higher levels of spiritual development. Yeah, I think I take that to be the sense of sapatisa. Okay, let's see.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, now I've lost sight of the... Oh, here it is, okay. Okay, when you finish, then you lower the hand. Next is Damon.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. Could you reconcile the admonishment against doubt with the Buddha's invite for us to not take his word for things, but to find out for ourselves?
Yeah, I think I just made that distinction. I said that the Buddha encourages what I call inquisitive doubt,
Okay,
interrogation, investigative doubt. But this is a kind of stubborn,
right.
kind of state of perpetual perplexity, indecision, unwillingness to sort of take that step of, it's a little bit like, yeah, there's a simile that occurs, I think it's in the Questions of King Milinda, that faith is like when you come to a river and you're on one side and you want to get across the river, you have to jump into the water and start to swim. If you are always standing on the bank and just doubting, can I cross the river? Can I cross the river? Should I cross the river? Then you just don't get across the river.
Thank you.
Okay, next will be use.
Yes, Bhante, I have a question about the arising of the Buddha, the next Buddha after final Nibbana.
Wait, I have to increase the volume. The volume is not coming through. Okay. Okay, try again.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
I have a question about arising of the Buddha after the teachings of the Buddha has completely disappeared. So, for example, like our Gautama Buddha has finally reached Nibbana, and then the next Buddha that arises is going to be Maitreya. But my question is, like, I read somewhere that the new teachings will only arise after the teachings of the previous Buddha has completely disappeared. But there's always deities and devas in Tusita heaven and bodhisattvas. They know the dhamma. How can a new Buddha ever arise if those devas have aeons and aeons of life?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, go on. So that was the question.
Yes. I just want to understand the conditions for the arising.
Yeah, sometimes we come into these little conceptual problems. But I think what is meant is that in the human world, the teaching of one Buddha has to completely vanish before another Buddha can arise. Okay, now Maitreya, as a bodhisattva in the Tusita world, will have a knowledge of the Dhamma, but then he passes away from that world and comes into the human world. And when he comes into the human world, then my assumption is that he undergoes a kind of loss of knowledge, complete loss of knowledge of the Dhamma. So he has to discover it again entirely on his own. But these are matters that, are beyond my own domain of ability to answer.
Thank you.
Okay, is it BC Deborah?
Yes, hi, thank you, Bhante. This is Deborah's partner. I really appreciate your teaching. Just listening to your teaching this morning, I realized I had to confess I've had a significant loss of reverence for some of the spiritual leaders, some of the Buddhist leaders, specifically the Dalai Lama. And I really struggle sometimes just to trust what they're saying.
Struggle to what?
To trust their teaching.
Yeah.
And to trust their leadership. And it's been very difficult for me just to continue. I'm sort of very new on the path, but I was wondering if you had any ideas about how to push through this obstacle I have.
Yeah, well, I think, you're taking that as in relation to reverence and deference towards the Sangha?
Yes, towards the Sangha.
Okay, what I say is that the Sangha here, I guess the Buddha is, okay, let's put aside the question of contemporary teachers. If you read the Vinaya Pitaka, that is the book of discipline, which is there are numerous incidents that are described there taking place during the time of the Buddha, while the Buddha was alive, describing the conduct of members of the Sangha. And it's a lot of the incidents are horrific, shocking, degrading, objectionable. So what really meant the object of reverence and deference, the Sangha as the object of reverence and deference, should be the Aryan Sangha, the community of the noble ones. We don't know individually whether this one is a noble one, that one is a noble one, but at least we have some idea of what are the standards of conduct to which a noble one should conform, or at least that an ordinary monastic, the standards of conduct towards which an ordinary monastic should aspire. And so we take that as the object of reverence and deference, and not individual monastics as such. Does that make it clear?
Sorry, yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next will be Sud, Dr. Sud.
Thank you, Bhante, for your teaching today. I just wanted to ask, based on what we talked about today, so, you know, how in lay life, especially when, you know, someone is motivated to practice the dhamma and then, you know, is really, really motivated once somebody hears the teaching of the dhamma, and, you know, maybe today I might be motivated, but then by Friday, like this week, it dies down and you're falling into, you know, the worldly, you know, affairs. And then, you know, you kind of lose the track of practice.
Yeah.
So based on what we talked about today, why is that? Is that because of doubt, underlying doubt, or is it because of not doubt, but just neglect? I mean, what is the main reason you think is?
Yeah, it's not necessarily because of doubt. I think that's just the way the human mind works. And I see that in my own experience as well, that it's just that sometimes one could put forth a lot of effort and energy, and then there comes times when you have to sort of relax a little bit. So that's quite natural and normal. But what is necessary is to prevent oneself from really sliding downhill, going from one level down to another level to another level. From time to time, it's necessary to maybe relax a little bit before you start picking up the effort again. Yes, I say don't blame yourself and condemn yourself if there are these moments of slackness. But the important thing is to keep one's confidence and trust, keep it alive, and keep one's effort alive, even if there is a natural sort of unevenness in the movement of one's effort.
Thank you.
Okay, unless BC Deborah has another question, because I see the hand is up. Oh,
I'm sorry, no, I'll lower it. I do not have enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can go on with our, Megan Ferry.
Thank you, Bhante. My question, maybe you've already answered with BC Deborah, but it's a question related to doubt and also the Aryan Sangha. And we've looked at there are different monastic systems or groupings. Where does secular Buddhism sit within this context?
Yeah, I think that brings up like maybe a very different issue. So maybe we'll just pass over that question now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because it's too big a whole big different area. Okay, Doran, did you have a question?
Thank you, Bhante. This is a slightly related question to Sutta 201, that broader question I've had in my mind. The Sutta 201 was talking about the Buddha's concern for what might happen in the world after the Tathagata expires. And I was always wondering what happens after. One question this brought up is what happens after the Tathagata reaches Nibbana? Not what happens to the outside world, but what happens internally to the Buddha. Do they still need, is your belief that they still need to maintain the state of Nibbana? In other words, the Buddha, when he reached Nibbana and enlightenment, he continued to practice for 50 years, continued to meditate every day. So that seems to imply to me that one still needs, the defilements can still creep in if you don't maintain your state. That's my question. Does that state need to be maintained?
Yeah, no. once a Buddha achieves Buddhahood or an Arahat achieves Arhatship, there are no more defilements, no more latent tendencies to the defilements, but you could say that their practice is done just as a natural expression of their attainment, of their realization. They don't have to, or they don't undertake the practice in order to continue to work on purifying the mind. But the defilements, the Buddha says that greed, hatred, delusion, or the 4 or the 3 asavas, or the latent tendencies have been.
Thank you.
Uchina mula, that's the word, cut off at the root, made, pulled out like the stump of a palm tree, unable to arise again in the future. But it's just sort of the natural mode of behavior of one who is liberated.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And they do enter like into the jhanic states and the special meditative attainments in order to experience sort of that bliss and tranquility of the meditative state. Because I imagined, especially being a Buddha, it's pretty hard work, you know. We always see, like everywhere, we see the picture or statues of the Buddha just sitting with the eyes closed, the legs crossed. But, you know, it ain't like that, but the Buddha is spending like 12 hours a day going around teaching, traveling from town to town, city to city, having to settle quarrels amongst the monks. In the evening, when he's near a town or city, hundreds of lay people will come. He has to give a sermon, a discourse. Then people will come asking questions. And so he has to rest the mind from time to time. And so they'll go into the meditative absorptions, but it's not to eliminate or to remove any more defilements that have not been removed.
Thank you, Bhante, for clarifying.
Okay, let us then move, look, see what else is in our grab bag. Okay, we did the 5 bondages. Oh, rice porridge. 5 benefits of rice porridge. Okay, so this is in the Pali word is yagu, but in contemporary usage, I think in India, it's called kanji. And it could be made of rice, but here in America, it could be oatmeal or it could be wheatina, I guess. So it dispels hunger, dispels thirst, it settles wind, it cleans out the bladder, it promotes the digestion of the remnants of undigested food. Okay, that's what the sutta says. I don't know whether I could testify for all of those advantages. And even, okay, 5 dangers or drawbacks in not brushing one's teeth. See, even the Buddha gives oh, I should send this to my dentist because he's a Buddhist in New York City. So he could put it up, wow, I'll send it to him, put it up on in his clinic, because he is in Chinatown, and I think probably a lot of his patients are Chinese Buddhists. Maybe somebody could translate it into Chinese also. Oh, he's English speaking, so probably those who come will also speak English. 5 dangers in not brushing one's teeth. I don't know if there's anybody who's a doctor specializing in ophthalmology, but it says it's bad for one's eyes. I don't know the connection there. One's breath stinks. The taste buds are not purified. Bile and phlegm envelop one's food, and one's food becomes disagreeable. So those are the 5 dangers in not brushing the teeth. And then if any of you have little children, you could give them the 5 benefits in brushing one's teeth. It's good for the eyes, good for the breath, good for the taste buds, And then bile and phlegm don't envelop one's food, and one's food has an agreeable taste. 5 benefits in brushing one's teeth. Okay, next, 5 dangers in reciting the Dhamma with a drawn-out song-like intonation. Okay, so I have to say, yeah, these days in Sri Lanka, I think that style of reciting with a drawn-out song-like intonation has become prominent. Like there's this particular style of reciting that goes like this, and maybe my imitation is not so good. Are there any, maybe if there are some Sri Lankan Sinhalese Buddhists, they will recognize this style. Okay, this will be the beginning of the Mangala Sutta. And please, Bhante, Buddha, please forgive me. I just want people to get an idea what that drawn-out style is. Evang me sutang ekang samayang bhagava. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Gita, do you hear chanting like that? Maybe not in Canada.
Yes, Bhante. Yes, it sounds familiar. Yeah. Yeah, it's really drawn out. You're right. Yeah.
Vincent, are you familiar with chanting like that style? Okay.
Yes, Bhante, yes, it's in Sri Lanka. They do have that.
They do it
sort
like
of like a prolonged, just
Yeah.
as Bhante was doing it. Yeah, thank you.
So the normal style would be like Evang me sutang ekang samayang bhagava savatiyang viharati. So that's very just in a very flat, normal style, giving proper length to each syllable, not drawing anything out. Okay, but let's see what some of it happens. Okay.
Yes, Bhante, I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, so one becomes infatuated with one's own style of chanting. Others become infatuated with one's intonation. So actually, if one chants in a normal style, but with a pleasant voice, others can still become infatuated. And now a present-day trend that I don't like, but it's, if you go onto YouTube, there are some monks with very, very good chanting style, but the current fashion is to have a musical background accompaniment to the chanting. There's one monk, I think his name maybe is Indaratana, very beautiful chanting voice, but you have in the background, you hear like violins playing, string instruments. I don't know why they do that, because he has such a nice chanting voice on his own, doesn't need any music. Okay, then householders complain, just as we sing, so these ascetics, the followers of the Buddha, they are just singing also. And then it's a disruption of one's concentration, and then those in the next generation follow one's example. Okay, here, again, this is going to also tie up with the theme of conflict within the sangha, especially the monk who creates trouble within the sangha. This is one who insults and disparages his fellow monks, who becomes a reviler of the noble ones. 5 dangers can be expected. So he he either commits a parajika. A parajika is an offense. There are different classes of offense, different classes of monastic rules, and the heaviest class is called parajika. The word parajika means what brings defeat. So one who commits a parajika loses his status as a monk, or for a bhikkhuni, loses the status of bhikkhuni. So for a monk, there are 4 offenses that constitute a parajika that bring about the loss of status. One is to engage in sexual intercourse. Second is to commit an act of theft of a degree of severity that would entail some kind of legal penalty from the civilian government. Third is to kill a human being. And the fourth is to falsely and knowingly make claims to supernormal attainment. So I don't see how insulting and disparaging one's fellow monks will lead one to commit a parajika. Possible, but I don't know how that's the case. The second is one will commit a certain defiled offense. And this is a kind of offense of a type, it doesn't cut off one's status as a monk, but it requires one to perform a kind of penance in the presence of the entire resident monastic community. And amongst these will be accusing a fellow monk of falsely and knowingly accusing a fellow monk of having committed a parajika offense. So I guess if one monk hates another monk strongly enough, he might accuse that monk of committing a parajika offense. And then if he's forced to confess, then he'll admit that it was a false accusation, and then he commits that defiled offense. Okay, third, one contracts a severe illness. Sometimes I don't really see the direct causal connection, but this is very serious. One will die confused, and then with the breakup of the body after death, one will be heading for a bad rebirth. That's especially in the case of reviling noble ones, that is, disciples who have reached any of the levels of Aryan attainment, stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and most serious of all is arhatship. And the example of this that comes out in a number of suttas, parallel suttas, is, what was his name? Kolika. He was a monk who reviled and disparaged Sariputta and Moggallana. He came to the Buddha and said, Bhante, Sariputta and Moggallana are bad monks. They're corrupt monks. They're trying to get close to you just to seek their personal advantage. And then the Buddha admonished him and said, do not criticize Sariputta and Moggallana. Those are the excellent, wonderful monks. You should respect them. You should follow them. You should listen to them. But this monk Kolya kept on insisting. Again and again, he reviled and insulted Sariputta and Moggallana. And then as a result, this is where the severe illness took place. Sort of as the immediate karmic result of that, his body developed these boils, and then the boils got bigger and bigger, and till the boils erupted all over the body, and then they broke out, and the kind of pus started to flow, and then he died from that illness. And then according to the Buddha, the Buddha looked into his destination and said that he was reborn in a bad destination. Okay, then another case, you can see here, somebody asked a question like, earlier, Like, how do you have respect for the sangha when nowadays you look around and you see monks behaving badly? But even in the Buddha's time, you had cases like this where the Buddha had to bring up these warnings to the whole community. And then here we have another example, a monk who is a maker of arguments, quarrels, disputes, contentious talks, and brings up sort of disciplinary issues in the sangha. This is sort of using different actions as a pretense for bringing up a kind of legal cases in the sangha. So the 5 dangers: he doesn't achieve any higher attainments, he'll fall away from whatever attainments he's reached, he gets a bad reputation, dies confused, and then takes rebirth in the bad destinations. And we have the virtuous behavior. Oh yeah, this is the general advice. This is not specific for monks, but here the Buddha is speaking, I think, in Patali Gama on his last journey before he reaches nirvana. So he gives a discourse, he speaks about 5 dangers or drawbacks for an immoral person who acts contrary to the basic criteria or standards of ethical behavior. So an immoral person, deficient in virtuous behavior, loses much wealth because of heedlessness. Nowadays, I don't know. Though I think one very prominent person who is not exactly a model of virtuous behavior, this past week, didn't he incur a loss of something like $250 million of his businesses? Usually they refer to him as TFG, the former guy, or at least the business operations in New York City or New York State are being closed down. So it does happen, though there are still a lot of people of very bad behavior who are extremely wealthy. Then you get a bad report because of immoral behavior. That is true. Whatever assembly an immoral person approaches or enters, he approaches it timid and disconcerted. Again, I don't really know. You know, I can think offhand of a lot of people who are of very heavy immoral behavior, who are very confident, even a bit brazen and inflated with confidence when they enter assemblies and give talks. But so I have a little bit of question about points number 1 and number 3, but I think on trust we can take number 4, that they'll die confused and with the breakup of the body after death, that such a person will be reborn in a bad destination. And then we have 5 benefits for a virtuous person who is accomplished in ethical behavior. That they'll accumulate much wealth because of heedfulness. Again, a little bit of doubt here. I know quite a number of people of good ethical behavior who very honest, and so when you're very honest, sometimes under contemporary conditions, you don't always succeed in accumulating much wealth. But certainly, at least among those whose opinions count, they'll acquire a good reputation. A virtuous person, whatever assembly they approach, they'll approach it confidently and composed. Again, a little bit of doubt here, because I know of numbers of people of very good, virtuous behavior who are very shy about speaking up in public. But I think we could say with confidence that when a virtuous person is on the verge of death, they'll die unconfused with a clear mind because they recollect their good behavior, and then they can rejoice in their good behavior. And with the breakup of the body after death, certainly if we accept the working of the law of karma, they'll be reborn in a good destination, either back into the human realm or into the heavenly realm. Maybe some people can have some comments about these points on which I raised some doubts. Gita, did you want to say something?
Can you hear me, Bhante?
Very clearly, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bhante, for all the teaching. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bhante, I have a question. You said that when you entered the Aryan lineage of a Sotapanna or Sakradagami, in a lay life, if somebody is scolding such a person or, accusing them of things that are wrong, wouldn't the same rules that apply for the monastics apply for amongst lay people as well? Because people out of ignorance, just yell and scream. So I'm just wondering and curious to know if a lay person has entered the stream and someone else, whether it's monastic or lay, doesn't matter, is disparaging or blaming or accusing unlawfully and incorrectly. Wouldn't that, what you just read in the sutta, apply in the situation as well? Not necessarily a monastic, but in a lay life.
I would think so too. I would think so too.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I would think.
The sutta doesn't lay down any limitation of that principle to monastics.
Right. So what would one do then if that's the case? What would one do? Not engage in a conversation because you don't want the other person to get any demerits. You don't want any harm to the other person because you want to protect them because of your compassion. How would you steer such a situation? It would be really hard, Bhante. Because you don't get mad and you don't get angry because, you're in control of your emotional, well-being, but you don't want any harm to the other person who is, throwing these accusations. How would you steer that kind of situation, Bhante, with wisdom? Just not say anything or back off, or what do you do?
You mean if you're a noble person?
Yes, yes, yes.
In a way, you try to avoid provoking the other person into insulting and abusing you if you're a noble person, but it's not possible to avoid it completely. Like even the Buddha himself, the fully enlightened one, got abused, insulted, not only abused and insulted, but some people tried to create a scandal around the Buddha. There's a famous case, infamous case of the Brahmin girl Chincha.
Yes, correct.
Sort of incited by her fellow co-religionists to, what is the word, create slander around the Buddha by pretending that the Buddha got her pregnant.
Yes, that's correct.
Those things happen, yeah.
Yeah, those things happen. There's nothing you can do, basically, right? You just have to, yeah. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
And then, of course, the case of David Datta. Okay, so any comments on any of these or questions? Oh, I see. Okay, so there's one, Jaden, Rowan. Okay, lower.
Thank you, Bhante. This question isn't related to the sutta. Is that okay?
If it's related to the sutta, it's okay. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's
is
not?
that okay?
Ask the question.
So, I heard that a master could create their own realms. Is that possible?
What?
Like a master can create their own realms for the disciples to follow and go to. Is that possible?
A master can create their own realms?
Yes, because I heard that like a teacher if their disciples eat vegan and meditate 2 hours a day, they could bring them to their own realm.
This I don't know anything about.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, maybe we just slip in one last sutta. Actually, this is pretty much sort of standard. We've already come across these principles. But it's 5 dangers in speaking much. Actually, there's no harm in speaking much if you're going to speak wisely with consideration. But this is probably just a person who speaks a lot at random. If they get a telephone call from them, they'll speak for 2 or 3 hours. So, or you meet them in the Starbucks for coffee and they just go on talking and talking. They'll speak falsely, speak divisively, that is, in ways that create division, speak harshly, and speak idle chatter. And then with the breakup of the body after death, they'll be reborn in a bad destination. Maybe not necessarily by speaking a lot, but if they speak falsely, divisively, and harshly, especially in ways that are very serious, that could create the unwholesome karma leading to a bad rebirth. Whereas you speak judiciously with thought and consideration, then you don't speak falsely, divisively, harshly, with idle chatter. And then, especially if you're using wisdom in speaking, then with the breakup of the body after death, one is reborn in a good destination. Okay, my voice is giving out, so I don't have much choice now about either speaking much or even speaking judiciously, but we'll have to bring the class to an end. Okay, so we will thank you for joining, and so we'll be ending with the sharing of the merits. So I'll recite the verses for sharing the merits, and then we'll be doing 3 bows to the Buddha. And we'll continue this with this sort of grab bag of suttas next week as well, just to finish up the Book of Fives. Then the week after that, then I have the next lecture for the Russian group, and then the week after that, we start the Book of Sixes. Okay, so we're going to share the merits with the devas and the other beings. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desana. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Dukha Pata Jani Dukha Baya Pata Jani Baya Soka Pata Jani Soka Antu Sabepi Panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then we'll end with 3 bows to the Buddha. We have a actual Buddha image here. I'll be standing up to lead the bows.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante, and about to Bhante. Thank you, Bhante Bodhi. Sorry.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Be safe, be well.
Thank you,
Take care of your
Bhante.
cold if you're having a cold.
Bhante.
Saranai
Have a
Bhante.
good lunch, Bhante. Namo Buddhaya. Thiruvan Saranai. Be well, Bhante. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Take care, Bhante.
So much, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
Thiruvan Saranai, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Take care of your voice.
Yes, Bhante. Take care of your health.
Okay,
Be
thank
praying
you.
for you.
Thank you,
Bhante.
Okay.
Thiruvan Saranai.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, take care.